Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Today is day 14 of PHP in DDCDP23 and part 4 of building MVC framework in PHP. The topics included in this lecture are we will be improving some of the folder structures in our application and creating a public directory where we will be moving index and other files into it. We'll be setting a .env file for database credentials, and also we'll be setting up error and exceptional handling and a very important concept of request and response cycle, which we'll be implementing through two main classes, the request and response classes. So let's dive in. Okay, so in the last lecture we had successfully built containers and then services.php. So now in our application, if we need any sort of objects for a class, we can use the containers get method and it will return an object for us. Also the services.php is basically the file which we are using inside the config folder, and it will also get us if this database class is needed, and container will provide that as well. We are using it inside the services container because it has string arguments, and that's why we needed it to be here. Otherwise, if an object doesn't need these parameters to the constructor and only the objects, then we can just call the get method of the container and it will return us the object. Now there are certain improvements which we can make in this application. Right now, for example, if we have to access some other page, maybe if I create a new page here, test.php, and just echo Drupal in it, and right now if I try to access it, framework test.php so it states that are now but the file does exist, so we need to have a way so that this page can, if a page exists, it should be accessed. If it doesn't, then it should be redirected to the index page. So if you remember, we had used in .htxs file, we had used this rule. So every page or any request to the server right now redirects to index.php. This even may involve CSS pages, CSS files, as well as images and any other server requests. So what we'll have to do is we'll write a redirect condition, and you don't need to memorize this because this is actually just Apache code. So rewrite condition. So this is sort of an if statement in Apache settings, and then this request underscore file name. So what does this mean? The condition should be, it should rewrite everything to index.php, but the condition is, if condition is this, sorry, spawn. So if the file doesn't exist, then it should redirect it, otherwise it should not do the redirect. So in this case, for example, if there is a file which exists, it will not be redirected to the index page. So let me try it now, and now it is not redirecting. But if this file didn't exist, then it would have to redirect to the index. Now if you try using CSS files and any other files, even images, so it won't be redirected because those would be existing in the file system. Is this clear? So we have made this one change so that we are able to access this. The next is, if you try accessing, for example, these are just folders, okay? So it's view directory and then name.php is some student name, or maybe just a header, this one. So view, partials, and header is the path. This view, partials slash header.php. Is it capital or small? Small. So view, partials, and header.php. Do you think if I add something here just for demo purpose, showing header.php, so this is getting access, do you think it should be accessed? It should never get accessed like this.
Yes, sir.
Because we have just created this header.php as a partial which gets added to the top of the page, okay? So somebody, if they know about our file system structure, maybe they will be able to access those. Similarly, the connection files, other settings, even maybe if we go to the config folder slash routes.php, for example,
Yes.
so it is also getting accessed. We should not be doing this. We should not let our application use files in the browser, or they should not be accessible. So we have to do something else for this, and let's start doing that first. And I will remove the header code for now. Generally in MVC frameworks and other frameworks as well, normally there is a folder known as public. So all publicly accessible, this the way we accessed header, it should not be publicly accessible. Only publicly accessible stuff should go to the public folder, okay? So we will move the index.php to the public folder. Also this .htaccess file to the public folder, right? And even if there are some CSS files or images, so they should also be there in the public folder. Anything outside the public folder should not be directly accessible, right? There can be some security, some passwords even saved in the settings files, all that, and if that they can become accessible via the browser to anybody, that can be very toxic, right? So only the elements which are inside the public folder should be accessible to normal users, right? So what do you think should be the path now? Index.php,
Public index.php.
public slash index.php. So right now it says, because we have moved index.php, so the vendor autoload is not
Yes, sir.
accessible to the index page. But before all that, let us create at the start of index.php, we'll create a constant, maybe here for now. How are constant defined in PHP? Base underscore path, and the base path should be dir name underscore underscore dir is a constant, this. Okay, dir name gives the parent directory of the current directory. Okay, so let us dump it for now or maybe we don't have dump available at the moment because of the autoload still not working. So the base path should be, if I var dump it, base underscore path. This is now a constant which is available throughout the site for us, base path, which is the parent directory of the current directory. So current directory is public. And we should have exit after, so that no code after this runs. And if I refresh the page, it's var www html normally. Okay, so for example, right now where is your vendor directory? If you go, it's here. The vendor directory is here, right, in the root of the outside of the public. This is outside of the public. So how can now I let index.php know that you have to use vendor directory? Because I cannot go one level up here to access a PHP page here. We should not, it should not be accessible outside of the. So what we can do is, what should we concatenate here? It's base path now. Base path, sorry. Base path dot vendor, because now this is available. Base path is a constant which we have defined. So do you think it will start working now, the vendor autoload? Because it's the base path. Now that error has gone off the autoload. It means it is working fine. The next is it has thrown this require config routes and require this. So what should be going here?
Base path.
Sorry, why is it? Let's see. Base path this. Base path this. And it hasn't any slash at the end of it, so we should give slash here. Now if we refresh the page, hopefully this error of routes will go away as well. Routes not found. Now it's public index.php. We haven't given any route to it at the moment, right? So we cannot, I mean, after the site we should have directly some routes like this, because that refers to index.php something. But now it is public slash index.php. Maybe here if we give any working route, student,
forward slash Raza.
okay, so here you can see this public is an extra parameter. It thinks as if this is now the part of the route or URL. So we will create in the root of all this, we will create another .htaccess file. Remember, when we have moved inside to the public directory, so here we will create another .htaccess file. What's the role of it will be? Any guesses?
Sir, removing the public from the URL.
Exactly. So if ever we have any public in the URL, it should remove that from the URL. It's actually not removing, but we will redirect to, we will assume as if this public doesn't exist.
Just ignore the public.
Yes, so we have a rule for it as well, which we can type inside it, and it's again redirect, or maybe if I can quickly copy some part of this. So rewrite engine on, this gets the engine on, and then you now do know about some about regular expressions. So what does this mean? If I type just dot and star,
Yes, sir. Any wildcard directory.
any wildcard, it should go to public slash, and this is the match. So if this has been found, for example, if this is index.php,
Yes, sir.
if I just access index.php in my site, it should move to public slash index.php. Okay, for example, if I access maybe site name slash abc slash def, for example, so it will move this to site name slash public slash abc, right? Because actually the files are now accessible in, which are there in the public directory. So with this rule, hopefully, if I now access afaq slash raza, so this is showing raza article, right? The route is now working fine. Is this okay? So basically we will now not be able to access other files outside of the directory like we were accessing them a while ago before implementing these changes. Is this okay? The next is in the view files. We need to make some changes in the view as well. So we are rendering the views from framework and source framework viewer.php here. Okay, so do you have any working route now? Let me go to the, because so that I can remember our routes. So we have controller action. So and let us go to our controllers. Maybe student name. So you are including these so student dash name and display dash name.
Yes, sir.
And we can have a parameter inside it as well. So student dash name Haris and display dash name. So now again we have an error, and the error is view partials header.php failed to open. Why? Because it thinks that the view folder is inside the public
Inside
folder
the
as well.
public folder. Yes, sir.
So what are your guesses? Why is this not being loaded? Because we need to use
It is outside the public folder.
exactly. So inside the viewer.php where we are including these.
Yes, sir.
So here we again can. So how many levels it is? So if we come, we are inside the framework folder, and then let us try base path here as well. Sorry. And refresh the page. Is it now working? It is working. Okay.
Yes.
So base path, there in an application there can be some constants, or maybe we can write all those constants inside a constant.php file and include them as configs as well. But right now it is functioning fine. Is this okay?
Yes.
So we are back to normalcy because of those includes which we changed. Now we are able to get all the results back. Any questions?
So we are doing this setup for the public folder.
Yes. So now only index.php is accessible, but it will be getting for its code, it can get variables and data from other files, but now they are not accessibly web accessible in the URLs. You cannot access these files now because they are behind the public directory, outside the public directory. So you cannot do something like this in PHP. For example, if I have to access maybe this view partial now, okay, so I'm inside the public, so you cannot do something like public dot dot, you will go out of the public and then you will enter view and then this.
Yes.
That is not possible now because of the structure we have.
In precision PHP, it is possible.
Even there, if you move files like this and use the htaccess code, so that can be controlled. There can be different ways of doing it, different folders. For example, different frameworks can even use some .htaccess files inside the folders, so you cannot access any files directly then.
So how this base path is finding the exact match of the URLs. For example, that we have changed the URL in the viewer.php.
Yeah,
Due to the base path, sir.
yeah, exactly.
And
With
we
the-
are not defining it inside the viewer.php. So
yeah, but everything is redirecting to index, so you have defined it inside the index file. That's the advantage of front controllers. Okay, so what so far we have done, we have used two different htaccess files and used
now only the files inside the public folder is accessible.
exactly from the outsiders, for outsiders, but from the code via base paths you can access those from your index file from the code's perspective, but users cannot access those files now, just like initially we did. Okay, now we will create if you go to the source and database.php file, here you can see we have hard coded not this but rather in the services.php. If you remember, we are using these database credentials inside the function. So this is not the normal way of doing things. We normally in MVC frameworks and different frameworks like Drupal uses settings.php to save all the configurations. Similarly, different platforms can do different things. So there is a way of using .env files. Maybe you have some settings for your local environment, then the development environment, then the production environment. So you will have separate files for each environment where you can use those to access your database credentials. For example, right now if you commit the code with the same settings in the services.php, all of them will have the same database credentials. So this is not the way out. What we should do is, there are a number of ways. For now, just the demo purpose, we will create a new file and we will call it .env. .env is just a file we have created, right? Here we can have, for example, you can use this is host, this is database user and password. So here we will create db with capital words, db underscore host equals, it's db, simple small, db underscore name equals db. That also is db in, so it's a database name actually. Then db underscore user equals db and db underscore password equals db, right? So these are the credentials, and we can have different, for example, if I have I can write site underscore name equals development. Okay, then if you push your code to production, right, production or maybe QA, so there the site name will be QA quality. So all of such things which are used for settings can be put in the environmental variables. For now we'll keep it development. Okay, do you think we can access .env files now in the browser? For example, if I use index maybe just .env, previously before the changes we had made, so this would have been accessible. Okay, but now since we have moved all of our publicly accessible files, which is index.php currently, to the public directory, so this is not possible now. Okay, so this is one of the security measures. We should not be accessing settings file like this in the browsers, right? So this is a good thing which we are able to achieve. Okay, now this database file, this database file should be accessing, sorry, not this, but the services.php. We should be moving those values from the .env file to this. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to maybe create a class which can read that file for us, and then we will include those variables. And by the way, there is a super global in PHP which is known as env super global PHP. So just like we have been using server request post get, similarly we have $_env. So such values should be placed inside the $_ underscore.
Do it through the env file due to the security purposes.
Yeah, so security, as well as you can basically access it from a uniform location, and it is dependent upon an environment, your PHP settings, where your web server is. Okay, so we will now create a file inside the source directory, maybe source, and or maybe the framework, because it should read our .env file. So here we will create a file and call env reader.php. env reader.php. It should have a namespace of framework, and the name of the file should be class name should be env reader. Okay, public function read, and it should be passed a path of the file. Okay, or maybe file, whatever you can call it. Here we need to include that file. Okay, PHP has a file method, and let us go to this documentation. So it's passed file name, and it has also a constant which is ignore new lines. Okay, so what are new lines in files? Characters. Anybody? For example, this is the .env file is this. So though they are not visible, but at the end of it has these big /n characters. Okay, so that's what we are telling it to ignore this. Okay, so we'll go to env reader again, and here we'll use the path, and it will return, and also the second parameter is ignore new lines. Like this, and we will assign it to a variable called file, like this. Okay, so this is the method function which we will call against the reader file, and it will return something here, and let us dump it for now what this file has. So if I call in env reader in index.php, let us do it for now just inside index.php after these routes maybe, and env reader equals new framework env reader this, and it should be passed what? The path to the file. So what's the path? Base path dot what? Dot env. Sorry. Slash. Is it going to be backslash or forward slash? And then dot env. And we can use that here. Oh yeah. And then we will read it. Read. And it will be pass this. Base path. Okay. This is dot. So let us try and exit it afterwards. Okay, so you can see we are getting an array. We are getting an array. So how to get all these values now? Through for each loop. So in the env reader, this is the env reader. Here we will have to loop through every for each file as line, $sign line, right? Line means this is the one of the lines, single line. Okay, if I dump if I dump just the line, so what will we be getting? Each line. This db host, this. Now if I need to just get this as the key and this as the value. How can I do it? Anybody?
Array filter key, sir.
Yeah, but right now it is just one string. I need to convert this into exactly. So how will we do it?
Explode.
Through explode. Very good. So here if I explode, good, line on the equal to sign and the line, right, and I assign it to maybe array, for example, and I dump array. So now what are you expecting we will be getting? Good. So you can see each value now is an array, and the db host is one key and db is the other key.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We can remove the strings.
Okay, so what we can do is, for example, you now know that the first value is the 0 is the key,
Yes.
and 1 is
Yes, sir.
value.
Sir.
Okay, so here we can use $_env. This is, now we are populating the $env array. Okay, so the first one is key, is this right? And its value is, sorry, array 1. Like this. env, sorry, this is array, and we are not assigning. How did we delete that? Okay, is this clear? So we are looping through each line and assigning, breaking it on the equal, so it becomes an array, and then we are assigning env variables to that array. That's it. Okay, if I dump in index.php, if I need to show all the values of the dump $_env. So we have ddef installed. It can show us a lot of further other values as well. So this is the dump for right now. $_env has all these values, but if you go to the bottom of the page, so these are our values which we have put up in the env files. db host is this, name is this. So throughout the application we can now use these values.
Yes.
Right, but the code we have written is a bit complex. So what we can do is we can simplify it in the env reader here. For each this and this, there is a shortcut for all this, and that's why I basically wanted to let you know what actually list and key value equals explode function this. Okay, so what this does is this basically breaks, converts it into an array, and it gets the key and value pairs, these as variables. So now $_env $key. You can know more about the list function in PHP, but this is what it gets. So again we are populating the env variable. This code is a bit easier to read, and if I refresh the page, so there is no change, the same thing. Okay, so list basically extracts variables, just like the extract function, if you remember, something like it. This list method also is.
It actually added the first value to the key and the second value.
Yeah, so it basically extracts keys from an array and assigns variables to it. Okay, now we have populated. All of this process was for populating the $_env array, right?
Yes.
Next, if we go to the services.php, so here we need to have access to these values, right? So how can now we pass those values to this array? Anybody? Because now $_env is available to us, right? So if I go to the values again, db host, this is db name,
Use the keys of
env. So
inside the env array.
yeah, so here we can directly $_env and it's array db host. Similarly, let me copy this. db, what else it was, db name, db user, db name, and this one is db user, and this one is password.
db underscore.
Okay, and now if I just remove those extra dumps and exit all this. Okay, one thing I wanted to let you know is we are using the env reader, new env reader. We are again newing something.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have to call the container class.
Yeah, so we are not taking advantage from the container we have, right? So what we can do is, we already have container here,
Yes, sir.
and if you remember, we have it initialized inside the services as well. We are returning container is equal to new container. Are we not returning the container? Okay, so this services already has the container initialized. So in index.php here we should have container somewhere like this.
We use the container. So it is the better.
No, we
If we use inside the container,
Yeah, it-
so the new container.
this one.
Yes.
No, this is the initialization of the container class we created in the third lecture.
Inside the framework folder.
Okay, so here we in index.php we have, if you include a file, for example, as I said last time also, you should then know where the file the value is coming from. Right now a container is available here. Okay, so rather than this, what we can do is env reader equals $container get, and what we should get, framework / env reader, like this, but not this, but colon class, the string name of the class, so it returns that. This and this probably is now fine. If I refresh it, hopefully it will still be working. Okay, it's working. And if I dump $sign underscore env, so hopefully those values will be there, because those are available now here. Okay, now the site name is development, for example. So normally in a live website there are three environments: your development environment, your testing or QA, and then your production. For example, you need to have some identifier so that you know which environment are you working on, right? So in our header.php, the partial we have here, where should I go to? Partials. Here, this is the header.php. So maybe after the body you can style it accordingly, but for example here I create an h2 tag, and here you are currently in development, but not hard coding it. So you are currently in, and here you will have to echo print $sign underscore env, and it has a key. Let me check what the value was. Site name or site environment, it can be anything, but just to let you know that we can use such values: site underscore name, and then this. Okay, so if I refresh the page now, on each page I'm expecting you are currently in development. So if the site moves to production, for example, this should not be the message. This just something you need to know. So if I there, the database credentials will be different: username, password, all that. So what you will do is you will just create a new .env file like this. Here you will change the credentials according to the production environment, whatever they are, and then the site name will become production. So now if I'm not going to change anything in the code, echo, all that. It is still changing the env variable for us, and from there we are reading it. So now so it's now production.
Yes, sir.
Is this clear?
Yes.
So that's how to read files, env files, right? And in a very large application you may have a lot of env variables which you can utilize for your purposes. For example, these days AWS you might have heard of. It has a lot of settings and environment variables, so you can add all those here, and then your application will be reading those values. So you can have different variables for your development and production or the QA environments. Okay, now we should go to introduce error handling, and by the way we can set, if I go to index.php, where it is, just remind me if I forget. It is now inside the public directory. Okay, so here, for example, if I need to show some errors, let me just hide it. If I maybe if a variable is not initialized and I'm printing it. Okay, so print $test. Okay, and I refresh the page, it is giving me undefined variable test in this on line 22. Okay, so we should not have error reporting on our production environments. For example, if there is an error in your code and it is live on the website, so people can easily check, oh, he has a page known as this, so the hackers can get into those folder structure of your code, right? So you should not be displaying errors, and it also is not professional to show errors like these on your production environments. That's why we should catch those errors, or we should hide those errors. So in your php.ini settings, you can hide. There is a value which you can off, and then your errors won't show up. But there is a function in PHP, ini underscore set, and it is PHP. Just forgot the value, ini underscore set PHP. So let me go to the manual. Display errors. It's a Boolean value actually. So ini underscore set display underscore errors, and it should be comma false. Okay, and above print test I will use this. So if I refresh the page, we have the error, but on your production you should not be displaying these errors like this. Ini underscore set display settings false. Okay. So you should have this value as false for production environment, but not on your development environment, because then you will not be able to see the errors in your code. So we should transform this into the environmental variable as well, right? So how can we do it? So we will go to the .env file here and show underscore errors equals. Okay, one thing, in .env files you can if I use false, for example, so it is taken as string. Okay, so we can use 0 also. So show error 0 means this is false, and 1 will mean true. Okay, so right now I will use 1 for it, so that those errors are visible. So what code should I change inside the index.php then? So if we should be using if $env show errors, and we don't need to use equal to with, because this by itself means true or false, for example. So if show errors is true, it means ini underscore set should be true, like this. If env show errors is true, else what? It should be false, right? Now what's the value of if I refresh the page, the error is being shown because .env file, it is true. So if I go to .env again and make it 0, do you think it will be hidden now, the errors? Good. right? So that's how you hide errors on server production and show them on development, so that you know what are the bugs in your code.
Inside the environment, the env file, if it is 1, so in production it is
Yeah, here it should be show errors should be 0 for production env file, right?
And for development
It should be 1, so that you can know what errors are. Okay, now if we go to I will turn it into 1 again, so that we can further process it. And that is, if I refresh it, you can see we have the error, but still is not very detailed. And we are not excuse me, also we are not handling this error, basically meaningful error, something like this. So what we can do is, we should, in the index.php, where is index.php? Okay, so there is a, if you remember the SPL auto register method, do you remember that SPL?
Yes, sir.
What would it do?
So it is including the files.
Yeah, before the composer auto loads,
Yes, sir.
we had used that, if you remember.
Including the file, yes, sir.
So now we have something like that again. So this is right now we are displaying this error, because this variable is not defined. Okay, there are two things, one is errors and the other one is exceptions. These are two separate things. So if there are some syntax problems, they are known as errors in any language. For example, here we are not defining the variable test and then we are printing it, so this will be an error. We call it error handling. And if, for example, some logical stuff happens or whatever, for example, I'm checking something here and it is not there, maybe some route is not found, so those are exceptions actually. So error is maybe mostly syntactic problem in the code. So here we are printing test which is not defined yet. It should be error handling. So just like I told you about the SP auto register function, there is a method called a function called error set error handler. Okay, so it will automatically determine, it will automatically check if there is an error, it will run some function, it will catch actually that function. So for example, set error handler is a function, it is passed another method, callback function. Okay, like this. And here to this function, the inner function, there are some parameters passed. So if we go to this documentation, set error handler, so the handler is passed these variables, parameters, int, error number, string. So the first 4 we will pass to it. Okay, error number, maybe int error number, sorry, so error number, error string, error file and error line, these 4 initially. So error number, what other it was, error string, error file, and the 4th one is error line. Okay, so what these are automatically passed by the language okay, these 4 parameters. But inside the function here we can set some exception, so we will throw new exception, okay, and exception can be of any type, but one of them is error exception, right? So here we can pass these values again to this function. So error number $, and in the second one error exception. So let us check what are error exceptions. Error exception. And basically if you go to this class definition, you can see it extends the exception. So in its constructor these 4 things are passed, 5. So it's message, the first one is message, the second is code, the third is severity, which has a default of error, then the file name, then the line. So these 4, basically 5, we will pass to its constructor. So what string, message, code. So the first one is message. So here you can have the error string here, so we can pass it e star. This is going to be the string of the error or message. The second number is for code. So each error has some code, for example. So here this is the error number e this. Third one is severity. So e underscore error is default, and we can pass it like this, e underscore error. Then the fourth one is file name. So here the file name is error file, right? So it should be passed to it error file, and the last one is error line, like this. Okay, new exception. Why is it causing me this? Maybe we have an extra. Okay, so what this code will do is it will sort of cache this error or anywhere in the code it is found. Okay, set error handler, it is passed a function as a callback, and the function is passed these parameters, and then we inside the code we are throwing new error exception, and then we are running this code. So if I refresh the page now, hopefully the error will be different now. So what it says is uncaught error exception, undefined variable test. In this line 31 strike, it is giving all the detail now. Okay, so error has changed, it has been caught by the new code we have written. It throws that error actually. And even we can have our own message also. For example, if this here we are not going to pass the error string message here, so we can type something like probably some syntax error in your code. That's it. So if you refresh the page, this error, undefined variable test in this, maybe probably some syntax error in your code. Got it? So we are using this in a non object oriented way. What we can do is we can quickly create a class in the framework, because the whole site should be able to catch such syntax errors. So if I go to, so here I will create a new file and call it error handler.php. Okay, first things first, the namespace should be it is inside the framework, so it should be framework, then class error handler, it should have a public static function, and the name should be handle errors or whatever, handle errors, error handler or anything like this. Okay, so rather than typing all the things ourselves, what we can do is we can copy this function from the index.php file we have just written, this function from here to this, and use that error handler like this. Okay, and the function name should be error handler. That's it. Throw new exception. So the new is the error handler exception is this. So we can use error exception. No, sorry. Yes, error exception. Okay. So now the method is public static function error handler and all this. We haven't changed any other code. It should be like this. So what's the name of the class? It's framework error handler, and the function is error handler, and this type is static. So how can we access it? With the scope resolution. So if we go to index.php, here we will use the new error handler we have used, so this one, right? Then, or even if you don't use it, we can inside the handler function. Now we will remove this. Basically this is callback function. So callback function is just a reference to the function. You just let your code know that this function will be run once this function is called. Okay, so here you will delete this, and here you will give framework slash error handler colon it should be the name of the function. What it is? Handle
error handler, small
error handler. And remember, we are not going to use this with it. Why?
Because it is not in the local file, so that's why.
Framework error. Let me just double check the name of the error handler. So it should be error handler. It's okay. So we are not using brackets with it. Why? Because we are just letting this function know that this is the function you will have to call. This should not be, because this is callback. So you are just mentioning its name and you are not calling it. If I remove, for example, this and this, and then I use two brackets with it, it means I should call this function, but I am not going to call it. Okay, I am passing it as a string, so internally this function will deal with it. Okay, so hopefully if everything is fine, if I refresh the page, so and type argument 1 callback must be a valid callback or null. Class framework error handler not found in this. Framework error handler. Okay, so framework error handler, maybe if I use this with it, let me just check. No. Okay, so it is not able to see this. Maybe we have some problem with the error handler. So the exception error handler. Okay, good. So it is this is redundant. So framework handler, this error handler, and hopefully so now we are back to probably some syntax error in your code, and it's back to normalcy. So we have moved the normal function to the class, right? The next is similarly just like this. This was for syntactical errors and other programming errors. Now we should deal with logical errors as well, or exceptions they are called. So for that we have a function, and or let us do that directly in the class. So for that we will create a new class in the framework. Now you know how we should do it. In the framework we will create another error, sorry, it should be called exception handler dot php. Exception handler dot php, right? Okay, so exception handler will also be inside the namespace of framework. Then, and we can even move these two into its separate folder, and then it should be something like framework / error handling or whatever.
Yes.
Okay. Class exception handler, and should also have a public static function, and it should be something like handle exception. Okay, here we need to check if there are error reporting is on. So how do we check that now? How to check if error reporting is on?
From the env.
Exactly, so we can do that as well. So if $_env and show errors, it means if that setting is made, then we should do something else, otherwise something else. Okay, so if error reportings are on, what we can do is throw new exception, like this. Okay, otherwise an exception we can call exception here, so use exception. Otherwise for example, you are on production, so you should not show errors.
Yes.
This we already have discussed. But if you are not on production, you are on development side, so you should show some errors, right? So this is for development, for example.
Yes, sir.
But this one should be for production. So here also we need to show something to the visitors. Should show something to the visitors. So what we can do is we need a viewer class. Use where is our framework / viewer. This is right. So we will create, for example, in the viewer in the view folder, we'll create a file and call it 500.php. 500 is for normally, or maybe 500 error or whatever. So 500 is just it can be well styled document also for the live site. So we can say maybe some heading, there is some problem in the site, for example, please try again later, or on the server. 500 errors normally are on the server. Right? So if you go to the class again, else, here we need to include this error, 500 error. So what we are now using the viewer class, and technically we should be injecting it here,
The constructor.
or maybe for now we don't need viewer to make things simple. We can require,
Directly required.
yeah. So how can we require it? It should be view
View.
500.php,
Yes.
but this is, we should have a base path
Base path.
dot
Yes, sir.
this, just for the simplicity sake,
Yes, sir.
because we need to inject, then assign it the variable of, so this is now redundant. So if show errors are on, we will throw some exception, okay, otherwise there will be this 500 file included. Okay, one thing we forgot to do, and that is this callback function is passed a throwable. What is a throwable? Throwable is a PHP class built in, so its object is pass. Exception basically is a throwable, any exception, okay. So we can use throwable, this one. So its object is automatically passed to this callback. This will be actually used as callback function for our exceptional handling, okay. So if an exception is, if there are some the errors are being shown, so what we will do is we will throw new exception, otherwise we will include a file. For now just check it again. If let me quickly try this. If you remember, if you go to, because we need to check it also, so if I go to dispatcher, and if you remember there is an else, what we are doing is we are just
Routes not found.
echoing routes not found, but we will not echo route not found. What we will do is we will for now throw new exception, throw new exception, okay, and we can do anything with it. Do you remember we had created in one of our classes, we had created custom exception classes?
Yes, sir.
So we can quickly create a new exception class, and we will throw that exception here. So if you go we will go to framework, and here we will create a new folder called exceptions. Inside the exceptions we will now create a new file. We will call it route not found exception.php. Simple. And here we will just namespace it first. What should be its namespace? Framework exceptions. And the second line should say class route not found exception. What should extend? You already have studied this. Extends exception. And exception should be used here. So exception. So here it will be extends exception, and that's it, right? Nothing else we need to do. So we have now created a custom exception class which is route not found exception, right? And it extends exception. So this throwing inside the dispatcher, here we will now use route not found exception, route not found exception, this one, and that's it for now. So throw new exception, this here. If you will have to use the route not found exception, it already has been done for us by the editor, and we should be thankful to it. Okay, the next thing is, because this exception is automatically passed, this exception will be automatically passed for what we are creating, this exception handling, this one exception. So we can check its type also. So maybe we can leave it for now. If the exception is instance of, what is that? Route not found exception, this, and we are using it here. Okay, so what does this mean? If exception is instance of it, it means it is that exception which we are part of it. So we can, what we can do is we can maybe define a variable for template equals 404, right? And else if it is some other exception, whatever it is, so then the template will be $template will be, for example, 500 are some server errors. Okay, so outside of this, if, what can we now do? We can include it view, and this should be dynamic. So how can we access it? $template.php. Is it okay? Okay, so what is it doing? If it is an exception of route not found, so the template will be 404, otherwise this, and we should create a 404 also here in the view, new 404.php, and should be h2 class is equal to error, oops, route not found. Is this okay? So this is just going to be some text. If a route is not found, it will throw that error. So we have created the class now. Where is it? Error handler, exception handler, sorry. So it has a static method which is handle exception. It is passed a throwable exception, and then checking if the exception is of type route not found, we just created that and used it in the dispatcher here. So this is that throw new route not found exception. If it is of that type, then we are using a variable 404, otherwise the variable will be 500. And then here we are using that to include that particular file, right? So, but this won't do anything, this class itself. If you go again to index.php, and as we have done set error handler, there is another method which is called set exceptional handler, and it also works like exactly like this. So what we can do is we will use framework. What's the name of the class? Error, sorry, it's exceptional handler probably.
So exceptional handler is for the logical?
Yeah, kind of, yes. And error handler is for syntactical and some code related errors. So framework exceptional handler, this is the class, and then the static, and then the method name, and the method name is session handler is the class, and the handle exception. Handle exception. Is this clear? Okay, so when will this fire? Now this is a question to you.
The route is not found.
Exactly, because we are catching it there, even using, so any exception, wherever we are using exception, this will be called. But right now the handle exception class will be, the method of the exception handler will be called. So, and we can even enclose it inside an if statement or something like that to check if the error reporting is on, but we will leave it that for now. You already have studied it. So if I refresh the page, it is this one. So this is okay. We have some logical error here in the exceptional handler. There is some exception at the moment. Okay, there is an error exception that is being fired now. So what we can do is, maybe let us comment this print text. So now, because there is the error handler exception that is also being called, or even we can make it to run only for the route not found exceptions. So you can have a lot of power now in this handler. I mean, you can do a lot of if and else switch statements to check all these errors and handlers, right? But for now we will leave it like this. So now we will introduce some bug in the routes so that this 404 is called. Okay, so how can that be done? If we go to the URL, maybe some URL like this, or if it starts with the number, this, and then hello, then this, maybe this route doesn't exist in our application. Oops, route not found, right? How do we know that this has run? This is 404.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, now you can, even if you go to browser console, inspect, and go to network tab, and if I refresh the page again, so you can see this is the route, but the status is 200. What should be the 200 status for 400? So the status code should be 400. HTTP status codes. So it should be 404 technically, but right now it is giving 200, which is not a good thing.
Yes, sir.
So here template is this. Here there is a function HTTP underscore response underscore code, and it will be passed 404. And for any other errors, it should be 500. This is only for the console, or maybe the header should have an error. Okay, why is it giving me an error? Okay, good. Okay, if I refresh the page now, so you can see even the console now shows it red 404, because the status is 404. If I refresh it again, so the status is 404, right?
Yes.
Is this clear? So what we have done with this code is, maybe you can add a lot of other spices into this exception handler, but for now you got the point that our system now has, at least for the routes, a separate exception handler. And in real world, because you should not be showing some page like this to your visitors, so it is well styled within the document, maybe some icons of errors and all that.
Yes.
So maybe let us try some site like this. If I go to GitHub / this, so this is 404 page for
Yes, sir.
GitHub, for example. So what on the behind the scenes will be happening, it should be doing something like this. It is including the 404 view page,
Yes.
probably, and it is all styled.
Yes.
So you can do the same for your websites also. Is this clear?
Yes.
Good. So that was a lot of work. Now we will continue with something very interesting, and that is so far if you go to index.php, this is all we are doing. But in all frameworks, PHP, MVC, or even other frameworks in other languages, there is a concept of request and response.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right now we are blindly doing all these. So any request to the website should go to the through the request class, and any response from the server to the browser should go through the response class. So this is done by all these major frameworks: Symfony, Laravel, Drupal, and actually Drupal also uses Symfony. So any request to the server should go to through the request class. And so let us create those now, and it has a lot of advantages. One of them is to encapsulate all the global variables, mostly all the global variables like get, post. It gets inside the request class then. So let us demo that quickly. We will create inside the framework. We are now getting a lot of classes. We already have created a folder called exception, so we should have another folder, and because it is related to HTTP, so let us create a separate folder called HTTP inside the framework. Is this folder or file?
It's a file.
Okay, so inside the framework we will create a new folder and call it HTTP. Inside the HTTP we will create a new class and call it request.php. Okay, so HTTP request.php. So this is class. So first things first, namespace is, what should be the namespace? Framework HTTP, right? The name of the class is request, and that's it. Okay, so the request class basically will encapsulate all the global variables. What are the global variables normally? $get, post,
Yes, sir.
cookie, server, and all these. So let us do that in the constructor. Public function constructor, and by the way there are two which we will have extra. Construct, and it is a function. So we will use the property promotion, right? Do you now know what the property promotion is? In constructor we will basically, it will be variables here in the class.
Yes, sir, exactly.
But
we can
used
define
with
it and
so if we can
Shall I
define it public, it is going to be an array. So array dollars, let us start with the URI. So public string $sign URI. URI basically is in the server global variable there is a URI, so that's why we are naming it URI. Then public method, string method. So method, it should be either post or get or all of those HTTP methods. So mainly it should be either get or post. These are two string variables. Then public, what should be a get? What should we get? $sign get array. We are basically going to assign $sign get to this public variable. Okay, so it should be array, and we will call it just get. Remember, you should not be confused with these variables once we get to Drupal or Symfony. So get is just an array inside this request class. Okay, and then public array post $sign post. Then we should have public array $sign files, and then public
Cookies.
array $sign cookies.
Session cannot.
We'll deal with session later.
Yes.
So then public array and $sign server. So we will call it just server. Okay. One more thing, again I am saying this, these two are actually parts of the server global array we will be using, but because these are used a lot, so we have assigned them separately as well.
Yes.
Okay, otherwise we can just get inside this array once we assign it. So this is just for convenience. So URI and method, and this a lot of frameworks do, that's why we are also doing it. So the constructor has these 7 variables now. The next is we will create, and yesterday I gave you an assignment just for this very purpose, so you can understand it well, the return new static. So here we will create another method, and we will call it public static function, and the name of the function is create from globals. Symfony also names it create from globals. That's why we are naming it also create from globals, so that if you get to Symfony and see its code, you should not be confused what it is doing. So public static function create from globals. Now a question to you, those who successfully did this assignment, what should be the next step?
Return
Good.
new state.
Very good. Return new static. So what this function will do, it will return the instance of this request class.
Yes.
Now what should be passed to it? Which variables?
Which should be passed to the constructor?
All the variables which are defined inside the constructor.
Exactly. So these are those
Yes, sir.
values which we need to pass. Okay. So it should be $sign underscore server, and it has, if you remember, the URL is for it is
Request underscore URL.
request underscore URL. Very well done. The second value is method. So again this should be $sign server, and it should be request method. Request underscore method. So these two have been covered. Now get post file, this should be easy for you.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Now $sign underscore get, then $sign underscore post, then $sign underscore files, then $sign underscore
Is
cookie,
for images.
any types of files. So $sign underscore cookie, and we should also make it cookie, not cookies. Okay, files is for files. Okay, then $sign underscore server. So as I said, these two are part of this array, but for convenience we are passing it, and that's why using them as well here. Is this clear? So now we have created a class which is class request, and now the next point of the puzzle is, what should we do with this? We should initialize it. And as I said yesterday also in the assignment to you guys, that we can do it with the new also if we don't use the new static, but because we want all these variables, only these variables to be passed, so that the user doesn't get mistaken. So what we can do is, now we will go to the index page. First things first, include the use framework slash http and then request. This is the request, right? Okay, so use framework http request. And now here again the question is, how can I use that to initialize a request? Request equals
class name and
Good.
request
request and create from globals. That's it. So this basically will return what? This is the object of that class now. And look how clean it is. If we had to use the new, so here we would have to pass all those dollars and array and all those things. So it's just very clean to use it like this. That's the purpose of return new static. So now we have a request.
What is the advantage of this?
All this process, right?
No, sir, so the static. Why we use the return static, the new static?
Because that this function will be called and it will initialize this request object for us, class for us. So automatically it will be, this is basically equal to something like this: request equals new request, and we will pass all the values here, for example, right? So to save ourselves from all this, we can use the static property of the class with the return new static, so it will initialize it for us. Also, one of the advantages is, during calling the function method, you don't need to pass any arguments.
Yes, sir.
So you will have to refer back to the class where
Actually, we want to pass the variables inside the class.
exactly.
That's why we do.
So users basically here, they will just call the function. They don't need to bother about the arguments to be passed to the function. That's the main advantage. Also, this is known as, you are sort of creating a you have a machine sort of, which is called factory actually. So you are using a factory to create the request class. Okay, so if I dump it now, right now, or maybe dd request and refresh the page, where were we? This one. So any working, do you have any working URL? Student, which one? This second one? Okay, this one. So if I zoom it in, now, by the way, in var dumper, Symfony var dumper, you can see plus with these values. What do they mean? Public. If they are minus, private.
Private. Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is one of the, so all of these are the properties of this request object. So you can see the URI is this. So what's the advantage you already are seeing? Within one class you have encapsulated almost all the global variables. Rather than checking them individually, you are now using all those in one class. So for example, if server has all these, you would have to use $_server outside of the class. So far in your custom PHP you have done that, but now you will use the server property of this request, right? Similarly, files, post, and all these things. So hope you get what we are doing. Okay, so if I have to check what's the method of the request, so it should be either, we will basically output this.
Yes.
What should the URI is? The URI is this,
Yes.
right? Okay. Now we should go stepwise so that you can understand what we are doing. If you remember, in the dispatcher we are passing two things, routes
Yes.
and the
Container.
container. And what is the URL actually?
That.
How we are calculating
Yes,
it?
sir.
It is
URL.
parse underscore URL.
Yes, sir.
So
Server and request URL.
yeah,
We are only taking the part from URL.
exactly. So that's the URL actually. And then this is the handle method of dispatcher. So if I go to dispatcher, this is dispatcher, and the handle is this
Yes.
URL. Now it should be what?
Request and then it will use the
So
server variable.
exactly. So here we have already initialized the request class.
Yes, sir.
So what we will do is we will pass not the URL, but what should we be passing, because
Request object.
we already have so much information now.
Yes,
Previously you were just passing the URL, now we have the whole request object,
exactly.
right? So here we can pass the URI here, this one, this is the URI,
Yes.
okay? So rather than passing the URL, what we can do is, what we will do, we'll pass the request. So now the handle URL is passed the request object. So what change we need to do here in the dispatcher? Handle URL, it is being passed the URL now, so it should be request $sign request.
Yes.
That's it. Now request needs to be used. So it's a use framework,
HTTP.
this one. So now the handle URL is passed the request object,
Yes.
right? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this dot route match URL, what we needed to do outside of the index method here, this one,
You're just
parse URL.
getting the paths.
So it is being passed the URI and then this. So we should just copy this line and inside the dispatcher, just a new way of doing it here. Now this is the URL, okay?
Yes.
So URL equals pass URL. So now what should be this?
Request.
Got request
And
and URI.
then URL.
That's it.
Yes.
URI. Got it?
Yes.
So you request URI is what, and this is again normal code then. So now the URL is coming from the request class
Yes.
and it's URI property. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, let me just go through all the code again, and if we need anything else we will be doing that. Okay, so if I refresh the page, nothing has changed.
Yes.
It's all still working, but at least we have controlled the request class. So now any request to the page will go through that route,
Yes.
that process. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, normally in frameworks, PHP frameworks, let me even comment out it here. So there is a request class, then there is a response class, and then there is a kernel class. So something like Symfony does that. So kernel basically, just like in dispatcher, we have a handle, okay, function, method. So here in kernels, what it does is it receives the request and gives the response. So it's basically the role which this dispatcher is doing for the routes, it is done by kernel. So we are not going to make it so, because this is not going to be a very huge framework, but kernel can be another class for us, where a request will be passed and response will be returned. We will do the same if with this same handler, this dispatcher class. Okay,
Yes.
so you can call dispatcher as your kernel here in this application, so that it doesn't become very complex, because it can serve our purpose at the moment. But if you see kernel somewhere in any other frameworks like Symfony, so don't be confused.
Yes.
It actually basically receives a request and
Give the response.
returns a response. Got it?
Mm.
Okay, so we have done one part, and that is the request. Now we need to have the second part, which is response. So we will create another class in the HTTP folder, and remember, we can have a kernel class also, but we are not going to do that to save time. So in HTTP we will create another class and we will call it response.php. And again, first things first, PHP tag, and then the namespace, and namespace should be this, sorry, and then the class name should be response.
Remove the small brackets.
Okay, so class response, it will have let us create a public property and call it $sign body. So response normally has, sorry, response normally has a body in it, all the text, right? Similarly, public int http underscore code or anything like this. So for example, 200, 300, 404,
Response
500,
code.
yeah, or maybe response code. It's a good, better name. And we'll by default it should be 0, because we will have to add it to any of the requests. And similarly, body can also be empty. Then we should have some methods, so setters and getters. So public function set body, what should it be passed? String, and body, and the return should be nothing, void. So public function set body, what should it do? This dot body is equal to body. Similarly, set code, or maybe set HTTP code, like this. So it should be an int and code. So this dot $sign, sorry, this dot HTTP code equals code. This clear?
Yes.
Set code, HTTP code, and set body. And similarly, get. So public function get body, and it should, what should it return? String. Get body, so return this dot body, sorry, get code, if in case we need it. So public function get HTTP code status code, and it should return
Code.
That's it. HTTP response code,
HTTP response code.
like this. Okay. Okay, there should be one method which is called send. HTTP function send. It will send the response basically back to the client. So for now we will just use print, and what should it print? This dot body, whatever is
Yes. Whatever is the request.
whatever is the request body actually, so it will be printed by this HTTP send. Okay, anything else we need for this? Right now, if we need, we will add other functions to this or methods to it. Okay, so the class is response. It has string body, variable, and then int, and we can oh yes, so the most important one, that is headers. So what should be the headers? It should be an array, and we'll call it headers, HTTP headers, and we will, by default, it should be an empty array. So how can we add values to it? Set header and get headers. So public function set header, it should be passed some string, public function set header. So this dot header or headers, it is headers. So this dot headers, and this should be an array equals whatever is passed header. And similarly, if you have to get some header, so how can we do that? Get header. Or for now that is fine. So if you have to add headers, HTTP headers, you already have learned about headers also. For example, location is a header, so that will be served for this purpose. Okay, is this clear? This is the response class. Now if we go to the dispatcher, we have passed request to this from outside, and from where? From the index page. This is the index page. Here we have passed the request.
Yes.
Now inside the container, if you remember, this is all the code you have written. We have written for the constructor arguments. This is the container code, and this is dispatcher actually. So we are using this code to get the controller class.
Yes.
Right? But if we go to any controller, for example, right now we are accessing, which one is this? Student name and display name. So if I go here, student underscore name, this. So sorry, this is the view. If I go to controllers, where are controllers? It's inside a
Source.
source directory, controllers, and here we have student name, this one.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the student class and this is the display name.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this controller should use the response object, right? This controller should be using the response object. So how can we do that? We will have to
Yes, sir.
use and then inject the response class,
Yes, sir.
all that, right?
Yes, sir.
But this is just one controller. Also,
For one controller.
one controller.
Yes, sir.
So for example, for any controller we are writing all the code, we will have to do that.
Yes, sir.
And if you note, if you can see, we are using viewer for almost every controller,
Exactly. Yes, sir.
right? So what does this make? I mean, what do you think we should do?
So repetition of course.
Yeah, it's a repetition of code. What should we do? Because this is a controller.
Yes, sir.
So what should we do? Any idea?
We have to use a container class.
We should create a parent controller
Yes, sir.
or base controller, it is called normally.
Yes, sir.
So it should have all the dependencies inside it. So any class, any controller should extend that. For example, we can do the same here. I mean the request and the viewer, but we will have then to do this for all controller classes. So what we should do is in the framework here, not inside the controllers, okay? In the framework, we will create a new class and we will call it base controller .php. So whatever you want in all the controller classes, you should put that here. Okay, so base controller should be extended by all the child controllers. So namespace is framework, and then and one thing, it should not be initialized by its own, and that's why the use of abstract classes we have.
Yes, sir.
So abstract class, and what's the class? Base controller, right? So here we will have to do some logic and all that. So one thing we can need request class maybe here as well. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so that's why I told you this is encapsulation. So the request object itself is encapsulation of the global variables, and then inside this controller we will have that request class also. So public request $ request, this is one variable.
Yes.
Then public response $ request response, this is another variable. So basically these two will be actually the objects of these particular classes, right?
Yes.
Now we need a way to, we are not doing it via controller, so we need some functions which will do it for us, so that these values are populated. So how to do that? Public function set request, and what should it be passed? A request object of type request. The variable is request. So just like we do it in, how should we do? $, this request equals what? Request whatever is being passed, that's it. And request is not so we will use request here, use a request, right? Similarly use response. Use request, use response, right? So set request, and then public function get request. Sorry, for now we'll just set it. So set response, and it will be passed the response object with the response this, and then $ this response equals whatever is passed to it, which is response. Is this okay? Similarly, as I said, viewer is being injected in all the constructors
All the
of the controllers, sorry,
Yes.
in the constructors of the controller. So we can do that here as well. So rather than passing it to the controller, we will create another public viewer and viewer, right?
Yes, sir.
And here we can pass public function set viewer, and it will be passed a viewer object of the variable is viewer. So what it will do the same thing. So dollar sign this viewer equals dollar sign viewer. This is clear? So now this is the base controller. We wanted all this functionality in all our child controllers. So what we will do is we'll go to the controller, which is this one, student name. Okay, so what should it do? Extend base controller.
Extends
Base controller this, and it already has been used now. Got it? So now this is redundant. This value is redundant. We don't need, because we already have that now. And we should check whether it should be private or protected. Maybe protected is fine too, because we can access it here.
inside the child.
Okay, so for now we will remove because this is now not needed, right? Similarly, this is not needed. Even the constructor is not needed here at the moment. So we will remove it because this particular class doesn't need the database class, for example.
Yes.
And even we can inject the database there also. Rather, we should do it, but we should not do it because maybe just like here it doesn't need database, so then it will be injected for even the non-database
Yes,
controllers.
check for all the controllers. We are
Yeah.
not using it.
Okay, one change we need to now do is we are using the in the dispatcher. If we come to dispatcher here, this is that controller, this is the container get class, whatever it is. Okay, so for example, if this is now their student container, so it will get it. But before this, now we need three things. Which ones are they? We need to pass those to the controller, because we have now a parent controller. There are three things needed for it.
One is the viewer.
Good, viewer, request and response.
Yes, sir.
So those three things, because if you go to base controller, these are the three variables we need: request, response and viewer. It can be protected also, I think, but for now let us leave it public. So these three are the ones to be passed to the controller.
Yes, sir.
So, and those should be done via the set request methods. Set request, set viewer, right? So now if you go to the dispatcher, before this line, okay, this is that controller. It has been initialized. So now, for example, controller, what should we do? Controller and set
Viewer, set request and set response.
set viewer.
Yes.
Set viewer what? The viewer class. But how to get the viewer? Now this is a good question for you. How to get viewer?
To initialize the viewer.
Yeah, but how to initialize now? After we have created the container.
So we have to use a container class here.
To initialize it.
Yes, sir, to initialize that
Okay.
viewer object.
Yeah. So viewer equals
Container.
this dot container. No, we already have container here in the container. So this dot container, this is the container, and we are asking it to get us what?
Yes, sir.
the viewer class.
Yes, sir.
So viewer is framework.
Yes, sir.
One way is you should use the fully qualified path framework slash viewer this,
Yes, sir.
then the class
Class.
that's it. So it will give us the class framework view. Okay,
Object of the viewer class.
object of the viewer class. What we can do is we can just use viewer here, for example. Sorry, viewer, and we are already using the viewer here somewhere. If not, use framework slash viewer. Let's try if it works. So viewer and its class name,
Yes, sir.
right? So now we will set viewer as $, viewer. So that's the first thing done. If I go to the base controller, so this was the method set viewer. It is passed the viewer class
Yes, sir.
object, sorry, and it sets it through this property. So now we can use this property on the controllers. What's the next thing? So I will go to dispatcher again. Dispatcher. The next thing is to set this dot, sorry, controller set request. It is passed what? So should we initialize the request object also like this? No, because that is already being passed to the handle URL. So here we will just use that directly. $sign request, sorry, like this. So now the second one is done also. How to do the third one, which is the response?
We have to initialize the response.
We have to initialize the response. So that again will be done by container. And look at the purpose of container, how helpful it is for you now. So container get, and it is going to be response colon class, that's it, and we will use the response here. So it's going to be use framework response like this. Is it clear?
Yes.
The next thing is we should pass this response now to the set
response.
Controller $controller set response, and it should be $response like this. Is it clear? Okay. Now if you remember, this is controller action. This, it basically prints the action,
Yes.
the controller's action, but now it should be returned to the calling. It should be returned to the index page here. This is where we call it. Okay, so it should return what? Maybe we can write a response equals this. This handle method should return a response.
Yes, sir.
So here in the dispatcher, this is where controller action this. So we will return this, but this action itself should return a response. This is a bit tricky. This action, any action, because we were directly printing it. If you remember, in any of the actions in the controllers, we were printing the views,
Yes, sir.
but now we should return the view. Got it? So where is viewer? Sorry, where is your controller? The student one.
Inside the controllers.
This one. Okay, so you can see we are directly printing in each of, so far, because we are gradually moving forward in this framework. This we are just printing the views,
Yes, sir.
but now what should we do?
We have to return it.
We have to return it. So the most important one is this one, right? this.
sir.
So for now just return this, return this.
To return statement it will not be written.
Okay, so that's what we will improve once we are into the advancing the template system. But for now I can comment these two out, this one and this one. But do you think we have the response object now here? Anybody? Do you think we have response object here? My question is,
No sir, we don't have.
we do have, because
This is
this
due to the base
this
controller.
exactly,
Yes,
that's my
yes.
question, that was my question. The base controller has the response where it is
Yes, sir. Inside the framework.
so the framework, this is base control, so it has the response
Yes, sir.
object,
We
this
are
one
extending it.
we are extending it, right? But now we should be outputting any output to the page, to the client, via responses body, and not any of individual view exports or anything like this returns.
Yes.
So in the controllers student name here, if you think, we are returning the output of the view template here,
Yes, sir.
but we should not be doing this now.
Yes.
We should assign it to the body of the response and return the response. So this is a bit tricky again, and so I will change the display name return so that you can understand what I am doing. The return should be response, like this, right? And here I will use response framework slash http/response. So now, previously what was it returning? The output of individual view templates. But now, what should it return? It should return response. So what is response? Response, if you remember, has a body attribute also,
Yes, sir.
right? So what we will do is simple. $sign this dot response. By the way, why are we accessing it with this dot response?
Because we are extending it
From the base controllers, yes. So this dot response, that dot set body. So what should the set body do? It should be this output. For now I'm just hard coding it, okay? Once we have gone further into the what it is doing.
It is after return.
Okay, it's our return. We'll comment it out. So this dot response set body, this viewer render this, and what should be the response of everything? Return what?
Return
What?
response.
This dot response. Return this dot response.
Yes, sir.
That's it. Because the return type is response. Okay, I will uncomment these parts, but for now just realize that we have set the body of the response to the output of the view template, right? And if you go back to the response.php, you can see the set body is basically, it's a property on the
Response.
class, and it is setting it. So whatever is the output of the view,
Yes,
it is being set to the body of the response, and we are returning the whole response object,
yes, sir.
not just the body. Okay, this, remember this. Okay, so if I come back to the controller again, this one, it is now returning the response, and where it is returning it to? In the dispatcher. Where is dispatcher? This one. In the dispatcher, this is being called now. This one. So if this is the return value is of this action is response, so this return means what? That we are returning response from this method also,
Yes.
automatically. So where does this reach? What is the method? The method is handle URL. So if I go to index.php, so dispatcher handle URL, and it is being passed request, and what should be returned? Response.
Yes, sir.
Right? So response from the controller has reached where? The front controller index.php
Yes.
through 2 steps. This is tricky, but once you practice it, you will get to know it. Why is it showing handle error? Okay, so the type is void, so we should change it to, what should we change it to?
Return statement of the response.
Of response. Response, that's it. Clear? Okay, so here where it is, I can type, I can make a comment here. Now each action must, and I will quote it, maybe capitalize it, must return a response object. Got it?
Yes.
Each action, previously what it was doing, it was just outputting the view output. Now what should it do? It should return, each action should return a response object. That's it. So where does this reach then? It reaches index.php here. It reaches here. Okay?
Yes.
So if I just dump it for now, dump $sign response, what are you expecting? What should be there? Just a random guess.
So whatever inside the display name, sir.
Whatever is inside the body of the
Yes, sir.
response.
Yes, sir.
Body as well as other things may be also there. So look, it is framework HTTP response, and the body is this,
Yes.
right? HTTP code is this, and headers are empty right now. So we can add headers also in an action, a response also, and something like that, right? Okay, so how to output that? Right now if I remove this dump, the page will be empty. Will it be empty, or it will be showing something? Because the route is matching. Why empty?
Because we comment the student header
So,
and footer.
we are not printing it, we are returning it.
We are returning it, but we are getting the response object, but we are not printing it.
Yes, sir, exactly.
So for printing, what had we used? If you remember in the response object, the concept of response has a send method.
Yes, sir.
Send.
This dot body.
So it will just print the body.
Yes, sir, body.
So what should we do with the index here?
Yes, sir.
With the response?
Send.
Response dash send.
Yes.
Good. And that's it. Now it will be
Printing.
back. My name is Hari. So now we have made the whole request and response of this application via the request object and response object. Nothing outside it. So you can already get the benefit of encapsulation. You can know what is happening in your.
Yes.
If there is something outside of it, I mean, you can realize that this is not through the request
And response.
or the response cycle, right? Okay. So I was going through, in fact we had opened one of the pages for HTTP response codes. So what are they? From 200 to 299 they are successful responses, happy responses they are called normally. The redirect responses are from 300, the numbers are 3 and 399. Client error responses are from 400 to 499. For example, 404 not found, something like this. And server error responses are 500, in the 500 range, right? If I will go to maybe the client error responses for now. So bad request 404, 403, forbidden, 4 not found. One of them is 451. This.
Yes.
What is this for?
Unavailable.
Unavailable for
Yes.
legal reasons. So if a response has 451 with it, so it means that this resource is not allowed, for example, for legal reasons. For example, maybe somebody doesn't want to display the mother's name of the student for some reasons, or maybe it's your passport number, NIC number, or anything like this. So if somebody requests that, you can return a 451 response, legal, not allowed, something like this, right? So let us do that in your controller just for the demo purpose. In your controller, where it is, this one, student name. Okay, here we will create another action. And what is an action? It should be a path. So maybe display mother name, right?
Yes.
And of the ID, whatever it is. So this dot response set body, we will just copy it. This dot response set body, what should it be? It should be a text, some text, anything like this. Mother name not allowed because of legal reasons, for example, right?
Yes.
This is just a message. Then we will return this dot response. Sorry, like this. Okay, but before this, we can set, because we do have $, this set, not this dot response dot set HTTP code. Do you remember this function which we had created on the response? It sets the HTTP code and it is passed an integer. So 451 we will pass to it like this, right? So the response now will have, if I go to the response class, so this is the method get HTTP, set HTTP code. It is passed a code and we are assigning that to the HTTP response code
Yes.
property, right? So we have done that in the controller. Now it's time to print this message where we are printing. So we will go to the response class again, this one, in the print, where is print, print send, this one. So it prints the body, but here there is a method in PHP function HTTP underscore status, HTTP underscore response underscore, this is built in PHP method. So it will be passed word this dot HTTP response code, whatever it is, because we have set it up from there.
Yes.
But this should not always happen, because by default we have zeroed it. So if it is set, so we will say if
Is it?
or maybe just $, this HTTP status code. So in it we will pass this function, use this function. Now what should be the status code of this 451, and then we are returning printing the body. So the new, if you go to the controller action, this one, the method name is display mother name.
Yes.
So how should be it in the URL? Display dash mother dash
Mother
name,
dash name, yes, sir.
and this one should be student dash name.
Yes.
So display dash mother dash name, display dash mother dash name. And if I enter it, mother name not allowed because of legal reasons.
Yes, sir.
But we don't know if there is some error in the page. So how we will check that?
In the network tab.
Inspect network, and if I refresh the page, so you can see even the status is unavailable for legal reasons, right?
Yes,
So you can know that this page, for example, you can check if it is allowed in USA but not in Pakistan
Yes.
for some reasons. So you can detect the IP address of Pakistan and here in the controller if IP is this, so you will set the status code to be 451 and response will be different, otherwise it will be different. You can allow that. Got it? So we have made a powerful response and request process. We will add further spices to the response class via HTTP headers and all those in the next part of this application. So that's all for today. We did a lot of things. What we did, we moved the publicly accessible code to only the public folder, set up the respective htaccess classes. So for the ones inside here we have this code, and then if you go out of the one for the root, because we needed to move all the requests to public / something, so that is ignored. Then we created the different handlers, error handler as well as exceptional handlers here. These are those. These we also tried setting up environmental variables via the .env file. And then the most interesting part of all this was the response and the request and response cycles, and that was done by these two classes. But we had to change something in the dispatcher so that the URL method it now accepts requests, and we get the responses and the viewer from the containers get. Also we have created a parent base controller for all the controllers so that they extend it. What will be the added value of it? All these goodies will come once they extend the base controller. And by the way, we have made it abstract so that by itself it is not initialized, but it can only be extended. So hope to see you soon in the next class. Thank you very much.